Okay, everybody, we've got our books. Are we ready to start reading? Got a couple of different ones now. Remember, every day I also read a chapter or a couple pages out of a new book. I know I read a lot, but I'll read this and then I got to get going because I got to get my out there. So, one of the newer ones is The Rope, which I've read before. A New Perspective on Freedom and Success, written by Mason Weaver, edited by Mike Feller. A New Freedom on Success. Chapter 1, America is at a Crossroads. I'm going to fast forward to the introduction. How you doing, Sergeant Major? Okay, so remember this. We are also reading Marine, which will be the next one. We are reading Relentless and The Art of War, and then a couple things on here. Now remember, we're reading 11 pages out of each book. We're not reading the whole book. That's one reason why I go. And then I got to go. Also, I dare you. So anyway, this is just the chapter read now. America is certainly a social, economic, culture, and political crossroads. Never before in our history have all these forces combined to the degree they presently have in order to influence the direction of this nation will take. Our country withstood the internal social pressures that came about after the Revolutionary War as we were transformed from British colony into a new nation, and these social pressures were especially severe during Civil War and Reconstruction. There were tremendous economic pressures during the Great Depression and World War II in the 1960s. We experienced cultural pressures from the civil rights movement and anti-war protesters, and most recently we survived the political pressures that were the result of 40 years of domination by one political party. All of these forces have played out on the American scene at one time or another. Since our inception as a nation, however, never in our history have all of them been so dominant at the same time. These pressures have now combined not only to change America's idea, but to destroy it. Even during the Civil War, even during the Civil Rights Movement, Black Americans called themselves Americans. Today, there are no recognized Americans. Everyone's national identity is hyphenated. During the Great Depression and World War II, we faced strong economic pressures, but never considered ourselves helpless or hopeless. There was very little panic among the people. We just came together as a nation and worked our way through it. We assumed that hard work would prevail, and it did. But today, every problem becomes a major crisis, and we are paralyzed until some form of government action is taken to solve it. In the 2000 presidential election, the Democratic candidate promised a bigger federal government that would have more central control over our lives. Yet, one half of America voted for him. That election should have been a wake-up call for Americans. We had two completely different candidates to choose from. It was a very clear choice on every issue. It was a test of our education, self-worth, self-determination, and national identity. It was a test of how we look at each other and ourselves. Were we slaves who were content pleasing masters or prisoners looking to escape the prison? We went to the polls in November of 2000 and looked at our choices right in the eye. After decades of teaching our children nothing about American principles, not to mention ideas, we had to choose between principles and deceit. The choices were clear. We had the promise of better treatment on the plantation of fear. Crisis and hopelessness are the promise of freedom and independence. The trials and choices were not the reason we were at the crossroads. The results were the telling point. With so many obvious proofs and clear national indications, half the nation's voters still voted to please masters and did not vote for freedom. This is a common phenomenon within slave society and with individuals who have a slave mentality. The slaves would always support the master. They thought their only hope was to get the best job on the plantation, but never to actually get free from the plantation. Sure, masters treated them rough, but he was master and he fed them. Master was responsible to provide their jobs, their homes, their medication, their retirement, their safety, and their children with an education. The slaves never considered any of these to their responsibility. The slaves thought they had a right to these from master because they had toiled so long in their master's field. The mentality of a slave is not to be free, but to be better managed by master. Given the chance, he will usually choose a better master rather than freedom. Master understands this and uses it constantly to keep his slaves in check. All thoughts of independence are discouraged, but he cannot allow thoughts of freedom to interfere with the slave mentality. The fact that half the nation voted for more government control over their lives proves that we are now in a plantation mentality. The choices were simple. One party promises more and better management of your life. The other promises to get you out of your life and let you manage it yourself. Half the nation thought it was strange and dangerous to be free. Who will give me my prescription medicine? They could not fathom getting their needed daily services from any source other than the government. These people voted for the best master because they cannot understand the concept of freedom. But master understands slavery and what motivates a slave's dedication to his master. The economy, whoever controls the bread controls the action. There is something wrong with the system that it will allow you to work and pay taxes for 30 years and then let you end up taking tickets at a movie theater after you retire. Master ensures that you retire broke and will continue to depend upon his kindness for your medication and other expenses. If you vote for him, he will take care of you and your children. Economic freedom is the real freedom. Master knows this, and in this book I will explain this to you. I want to see something. Okay. The slave mentality. What is slave mentality? It is the same internal force that keeps and abuses women with her man. She will defend him to others, fight the police who come to her rescue, and then return to him, giving him more love the more he abuses her. She thinks of herself as useless without him and unable to take care of herself or her children. She believes that if she loves him just a little more, he will stop beating her. If she has more babies for him, he will no longer cheat on her. Her friends and relatives cannot tell her to leave him. She doesn't understand. If they take her away, she will return to him. If he leaves her, she will find someone just like him to abuse her more. You cannot tell her to leave because she believes there is no life away from him. The abuser has convinced her that she is useless, unattractive, and incapable of making it on her own. She has such low self-esteem that she will reject anyone who tries to help her. She feels better denying herself freedom because she doesn't think she deserves to be happy. She will go to work and lie about her black eye. She will wear a smile while crying underneath. An abusive wife thinks her life and lifestyle depend upon how well she pleases her master, even with the door of escape wide open. Many abused women will not leave. The plantation mentality functions in much the same way as a small child. Everything a child needs requires some action on a parent's part first. If the child is hungry, a parent must act. When the child is sick, a parent must act. To get the child to bed or get up, dressed, and washed to go out requires a parent's permission and action. A child knows he cannot do anything without input from a parent. The child would not even understand the concept of independence from the parent. A young child would be afraid of you if you suggested that they could be free from the dominance of that parent. They would ask, "Who will feed me?" They would think you hate them because you were trying to get them to function independently of the parent. The plantation mentality is the belief that your economic livelihood is the concern or responsibility of others who, in truth, don't care about you at all. In this mental state, saving your own money for retirement becomes risky, but allowing others to ensure a limited retirement lifestyle for you is much more secure. Working hard for the benefit of others becomes the norm, and working for yourself and your family becomes selfish. You will find that very notion of owning your own business is an alien to your friends and relatives. You will experience resentment and even hostility from others. There is a reason for such hostility. You are thinking like a prisoner, and they are thinking like a slave. Question: are you going to be slave to the government or masters of your own independence? To an independent thinking person, the notion of freedom will never be confused with one of safety. We must decide both as a nation and as an independent people if we want the government to keep us safe or allow us to be free. In order for the government to keep us safe, they must control us. It must force mandates and regulations on business to ensure a certain quality of life for workers. It must control our driving and make sure we put our seatbelts for our own protection. The government must tell our business owner whom to hire based upon its own criteria. When employees can take vacations and leave of the absence, and how and when they can be fired. In order to keep you safe, the government will also tell you how to educate your children, even what type of careers they will have. For our safety and security, the government has taken over most of our retirement plans, our medical insurance, and our daily lives. When we are afraid and ask for help, the government's response is to take more power and freedom from us. For us to remain free, the people must control the government. We have vested power in the government to protect certain rights for us. One is to ensure domestic tranquility, and other is to pursue the happiness. However, the Founding Fathers never envisioned the nanny state. Government we know have. Independent, free people no longer have any freedom from the government. Everything we do, to some degree, controlled by the government. But the founders designed our system of government in such a way that we were supposed to be a self-governing people. Responsibility comes with freedom. It is what you are fully responsible for, not whom you must fully rely upon. Show me someone who is responsible, and I will show you someone who is free. If your income is too low and you would rather get a small raise from your master instead of owning your own business, you have a slave mentality. If your refrigerator is empty and you seek more government cheese, you are a slave. If you think every problem requires a government solution, you are not thinking independently. If you depend upon others for your safety, security, economic well-being, you will continue to look for the best master to serve, and you will always have a plan for you. What is your plan for yourself? And then chapter 2 will be tomorrow. One book down. Now I'm going to start with, we are on chapter 5. Oops, nope, we're on page 30. So Chesty is in Haiti right now. And he is now starting to fight. And we are... Okay, so we're on page 30. And I will take this one to page... if I can find it. So now we are going all the way to page 39. And then we're going all the way to new skills. Okay? So this is Chesty, the life of Chesty Pull, the number in history when 5 Navy crosses. So you can go back into my Facebook videos and you can see that we've read all the way up to page 30 in this book. Now this is, Lieutenant said, and when they catch our wounded, well, Captain, if you see one, you will never forget. The Cocos believe that every man who dies must go before the gods, and they use their knives to see that when our men go, they are beyond recognition. They slash the face to ribbons and tear the body apart. You will see. Puller was learning valuable lessons from Haitians. Just a second. Need my water. I learned yesterday I need to drink a little bit of water while I'm reading. Yes, I filled up my daughter's water bottle, and I got mine too, but mine's on the other side of the room. Alright, so I'll put that back there. Okay. Captain, is a matter of life and death for officers and non-commissioned officers to have respect from the men and something more adulations. They must obey orders to the letter without question, though they die for it. It is the only way to handle men in combat. If you lose control, you lose lives. It is so simple as that. About 3 weeks later, when he was off patrol, Puller attended the christening of a child born on the trail and stood as his godfather. He was surprised to hear the priest call the name Lafayette Puller Franciscois. It was the first of scores of namesakes in his long career. Lewis gave the priest $5 and asked that a candle be burned for the child. It will be done, It will be done, Captain, and the candles will be burned for you. And prayers said, "Bless you, sir." Lieutenant Laney was soon taken from Puller to duty at the palace of President Duautogravs in the capital. There was an able replacement, a Lieutenant Calix, who helped to further the education of the captain in the patrols which followed in rapid succession. The teaching of Louete saved the captain's life more than once, notably on a patrol near the village of Sainte-Fe, where he had a brush with death. A priest in this place told Puller of the one Dominic George, a bloodthirsty Caco leader who had wrought much damage in the region and was now in camp about 15 miles away. Puller told Juanito to pass the word that they would leave for Mirabales the next morning and to see that it got public attention. At 10 o'clock the following morning, the patrol took the dusty trail, followed the pack mules dragging a number of bushes Puller had cut. He took with him every native that met on the trail, and then they had gone several miles, turned his troops off the main road. The civilians stood under guard and sent the pack mules in to Mirabales. The patrol went no more than a mile from the trail, but put out sentries and slept until dark. At dusk, Puller had the men leave heavy gear with a guard, and in a light marching order headed for the camp, the Caco camp. They marched for hours until about 2 a.m. A rainstorm burst upon them. Brunstad said that the enemy must be near, and the march slowed. The column in a single file without lights or sound in the darkness and rain. Saramonte led the way, followed by Brunot, Puller, and 2 firing teams, then the mass machine guns, and the rest of the company under Lieutenant Calix. After an hour, the rain stopped and the moon appeared, and they rounded a bend. The vanguard saw a half-dozen glowing logs at the trailside, now smoking and steaming. "This was to light the trail for centuries, Captain," Brunot said. Puller walked past the logs and saw a native with a rifle at ready on a high bank above the road. There was a challenge. Que vios! Montes gave a quick reply, Coco, and the three leaders moved ahead into the clearing. Puller saw a few huts and many lean-tos with several fires still burning before them. A burly man rose from a hammock in the largest of the huts, where there was a light, and shouted, Who passes? The sentry by the trail called reassurance, Cocos Puller! Carmenas and Brot lay flat in the grass, and Puller held the big man in his rifle sights until he turned back to his hammock. He later regretted that he did not fire, for this was the bandit leader, Georges. Puller sent Bronut back for the rest of the company, with orders to flank the camp. And don't mind us when the shooting starts, we'll be flat. Hurry, Bronux was only a few yards away when a bandit came from a hut with a rifle, walking straight toward the invaders. Puller put a restraining hand on the Suramonte, hoping that the man would pass by them. But he came on. When he was but a step away, he halted. Who are you? His rifle was at the ready. Puller shot him, and as the man fell, the company charged up, and Cocos poured from the shanties. There was a fury of fire, during which Puller took two quick shots at George. Sorry that I'm kind of all over the place, everybody. It was over within a few minutes, and the estimated 150 to 200 Cocos fled, leaving a few casualties behind. Puller found George's rifle, a new guru, and his initials burned in the stock, and 27 other rifles in the lean-tos. The company had no casualties and left with several dozen fighting cocks they had come to expect as loot in raiding a camp. Puller made a brief, matter-of-fact report of the affair to headquarters, but tales of his bravery under fire were told for months in the barracks. One day, when Lewis led his patrol to a supply dump in the field, he met Louis Coquel, one of the legendary characters of the Corps. A dark, barrel-shaped man who spoke rapidly in broken English. A Serbian cook who had won the Medal of Honor in the World War. In his tent that night, Puller got the benefit of a Coquelia explosion. We fight this war like damn fools, Puller. They scatter us like pieces all over Haiti. Kuka patrolled 1P, you 1P. They put us in a few posts, and damn if we can leave the tents to find the enemy. This is not war. This outpost waiting drives me mad. If they want to fight, they must bring all together and send us out to find Cocos and end this thing. Puller listened to Coquella for hours and remembered that night. I learned one of the great lessons of warfare from him. Concentration of force. It was familiar to me from having read Caesar and Napoleon, but no one put it like Coquella. He was one of the first critics of American warfare I had met. We still have not learned the lessons of military concentration in America, and I can't see why. It's plain in every worthwhile textbook. And the month afterward, Coquella went with Puller on many patrols, adding his machine gun company to Company A. One night, the combined force set out just after dark, marched all night without incident, and was halted at dawn by the commander, who ordered all hands to sleep until late afternoon. Coquella raged. No real man can sleep in the day. I will hunt the enemy. He asked Puller to go scouting with him, but Puller declined, saying that he would obey orders. Coquella borrowed a Browning automatic rifle, got permission to stalk Caicos until dark, and disappeared. He was back at twilight and marched with patrol all night without a sign of fatigue. Puller and his friends were amazed to see Coquella keep up with this pace for a week. And though some scoffed that he merely left camp to sleep away the days, there were few doubters. Puller got an indelible memory of Coquella on a trail one day when the Sir broke the silence of the march with a roar. Halt! And hammered on his huge chest, shouting, Me, the great Coquella, greatest chief of Milwaukee, a goddamn second lieutenant in the Marine Corps, helling about in these goddamn bushes. He ceased as abruptly as he began and walked on without another word. Puller's military reading bore fruit in the jungle fighting. He conducted experiments with the aid of Brunot and Calix. He told the lieutenants in the Boer War the English found that they were killed few enemies when they lay on high ground, and the Boers were low. They always shot overhead. Men usually fired too high on such ground. The natives saw the point, and Puller went to work on the problem. He had special rifle sights made in a railroad machine shop with a tip twice as high as regulation. The men used these sights on patrol. When the company went to the rifle range, Puller acted as armor, inserting the normal sights before the men went to the targets. A simple change which increased confidence and accuracy. He was also troubled over the inability of men to shoot well in the dark, for they often fired into the ground or high in the air. His remedy was a wooden stake, varying with the height of each man. Tried to stack swivels of his rifles with rawhide. When the marksman lay prone, they rested the barrels on the stakes, quickly ready to fire parallel to the ground rather than high or slow. The captain was less successful in other attempts when he asked the chief of constabulary for shepherd dogs to use on the trail, for example. He got no reply. But he was told unofficially that the dogs were taboo, since the French had used them to hunt runaway slaves in Haiti. During his months at Mirabales, Puller was once called into conference between brigadier officers and Major Roy Geiger, Major Roy Geiger, chief of the Marine Aviation, who had come on as an inspector tour. Lewis was asked for his opinion on the progress of the fighting. We could do more with the planes. How? They should be out in country where the trouble is, and not on a field at Port-au-Prince. You could scatter little fields all over Haiti and keep planes there. But we have no stripes, Geiger said. But we have about 1,000 prisoners here, Puller said. In most places, you'd only need to cut the grass, except in the rainy season, you'd have no trouble. We'll try it, Geiger said. Within a few weeks, the little planes, most of them World War Jennies, and using isolated landing fields in Caicos country, and one operated from Polar Strip near Mirabales within 3 days. He made some of the first flights. Buck Weaver, a Marine pilot, flew him for a couple of weeks, but they were limited to the study of the terrain, for though there was a score of 22-pound bombs, there were no bomb racks. A succeeding pilot, a Lieutenant Sanderson, declined Puller's offer to toss bombs overboard from the rear cockpit and devised a release mechanism by fastening a canvas mail sack under the fuselage with a sash cord sewn to either end. When Puller spotted a Caco camp below, Sanders loosened the end of the rope, tied in his cockpit, and the bombs fell. Puller flew a dozen of such missions, but the damage to the enemy was unknown, though Lewis claimed that the crude bomb sight had uncanny accuracy. These, so far as Puller knew, were the pioneer flights of close air support in the Marine Corps. General Jean A. Lejeune, Commandant of the Marine Corps, had come to Haiti on inspection, and Lewis was anxious to see the hero of the fighting in France, the only Marine who had commanded a division in AEF. He met him on the porch of the mess hall in Mirabales, where Lejeune had talking with his drink commander, Colonel Thomas A. Clinton, and other officers. Lejeune won Puller's heart. A Marine patrol filed past just in from the hills, and the officer turned to his watch. A sturdy band of men moving that easy gain of jungle fighting. Returning from much of that had obviously been long and hard. They were unshaven and ill-kept. I'm afraid the men are a little ragged and out of uniform, Sir Clinton said. I'm trying to improve them. Colonel, I'm a field soldier, Lejeune said. I don't give a damn what men look like in the field. Only one interests me, and that's ending this war. Don't waste your time shining them up for jungle work. Our only objective is success, and I demand that. Early in 1920, after only 8 months of combat experience, Louis Puller was promoted to command the sub-district of Port-au-Prince, in a remote corner of southern Haiti. He was almost constantly on patrol. In April, he was fellow by malaria. He was so weak one morning with throbbing head and aching body that he could not leave his bed. He took large doses of quinine, and on the advice of his first sergeant, tried rum as often as he could stomach it. In the 5th day of his fever, he lost consciousness. Lewis opened his eyes to see a stranger leaning over him, a Negro doctor. He turned and saw the round, beguine face on the French priest, who was the only other white man in the sub-district. You have a bad fever, the priest said, but you will be better now. I have given you a quarantine intravenously, the doctor said, and now I must give you more. He held a huge hypodermic. My God, you must be a veterinarian. The malaria does not easily surrender. You need to have fear. You need no fear. I am trained in France for many years. You will be better now. Puller walked the following day and within a week was back on his duties. His first sergeant brought him a bill for 2 gallons of rum used in the cure. You black devil, you poured it between my teeth when I passed out. Or you had big parties in the barracks. The grinning sergeant folded the money away. The captain is not the best patient. Many doctors, many treatments. A few days afterward, Puller rode over the mountains trail to Oxcayas for his monthly report to his district commander, who greeted him with a smile and a handshake and chanted as if from an official document. For valor in action, in the outpost reign a tour de frere, with the disregard for his own life. Captain Puller, I have the honor to inform you that you are to report to Port-au-Prince for the purpose of being awarded the Medaglia Militaria of the Republic of Haiti. There was a brief round of drinks and celebration, and Puller soon left for headquarters. He was decorated in a ceremony at Port-au-Prince on April 17th, the first of his awards for gallantry in action, and after 2 days' leave, was back in his sub-district hard at work. He wrote Tom Poland back in the States. You may rest assured I was relieved when I found that I had been ordered to Port-au-Prince to be decorated for killing Caicos and not to be court-martialed for the same. It's funny as hell to me. Every once in a while, some misguided fool up in the States who knows nothing of the troubles here sets up a howl over a few black bandits being knocked off. Well, someone has to be the goat, and it generally a genuine officer. You don't want to calm down here, Poland said. Poland, stay in the States and make something of yourself. It's a dog's life here. Unless I get into the Marine Corps, I have a pretty rotten-looking future ahead of me. The next month, May 1920, the Caicos campaign came to an end with the slaying of the 2 chieftains, Charlemagne Perez and Bohemond Batteville, by patrols led by Captains Herman Hankett and Cy Perkins. An armistice was declared, and the tribesmen poured into the cities by the hundreds to give up their arms and make peace. Every soldier who brought in his weapon was given new clothes and $10. Puller was in Maribellis in these days, intent upon studying the enemy. He talked with literally hundreds of the bandits, hearing their various of combat in which he had fought, and searching always for word of the killing of his friend Lawrence Muth, who had been the victim of a Caicos ambush in the last week of the fighting. He had written Tom Poland of the report of Muth's death. In the fight with Caicos a few weeks back, Muth got his. The Marines and guardmen left him where they retreated. Damn them. I surely hope he was dead when the black men got to him. The next day, a large force hiked over to the scene. There wasn't a piece of flesh or bone as large as my hand. His head is stuck up on one end of the pole somewhere now, out in the hills. Puller picked up Muth's trail from a minor Caicos chief, Juan Chalais, who was in the crowd town. Puller, I do not like French very much. This is hard. Who was in the crowd town. Puller talked with him, his improved Creole, and the arrogant native warrior told of Muth's end without reservation. They walked into our trap, and it was beautiful. Your lieutenant, Muth, he was the first. He fell, but he was not dead. And when we drove the enemy away, we made talk with our gods. We were 4 chiefs to make the sacrifice. As always, we took off the head from the lieutenant and cut up his body. Puller sickened at Crescent told of these obscene atrocities committed by the most corpse. Then we opened the chest, Curry said, and took out the heart. It was a very large, and we ate it. We ate of it. Each of the 4 chiefs to partake of the courage of our Lieutenant Muth. It was a glorious day. In other words, the enemy was eating the hearts and basically taking off the heads and putting them on poles to scare the Americans. That's the result of that. Then we opened the... Puller controlled himself and on orders from the commander took Charles to the prison. Lewis taunted the Negro the 2 blocks to the guardhouse in an effort to sting him into a dash for freedom. But Joseph was too shrewd for that. Shortly afterward, however, the chief was killed in an attempt to escape his guards. Lewis soon got a new post as commander of the district of St. Mark, where he was military governor of the territory of hundreds of square miles of rugged country, with authority over the courts, police, and civilian affairs for 105,000 people. He had never been so busy, for he was endlessly besieged by the problems of those who came to the little town. He was ordered to build barracks for his outposts, though he had no experience and almost no money for the purpose. Headquarters sent just enough cement for the floors and sheet iron for the roofs. The rest was up to the commander. Puller responded with vigor, and for months he drove trains of prisoners through the jungle in a style that reminded him of the building of the pyramids. "I may go to hell for this," he told a visiting officer, "but I've got to finish, like it or not." There were no pack animals, so the half-naked swarms of Haitian prisoners carried logs from the distinct forest to hew into beams. They stumbled under baskets of limestone they had dug from quarries and pounded into powder. On the barracks site, they burned this to produce a rich yellow-white ash. For months, the men quarried stone, cut it into rough blocks, and bored into Puller's watchful eye. Page and a half left. Dozens of them broke down under burdens and were useless for the work. A few of them died, but the hills, the 20 barracks, rose under the hands of masons. Carpentry found by Puller in the prison pens. The small shelter were 14 by 13 feet, with stone walls 2 feet thick, pierced the loopholes. Each had an officer for a 3-man outpost, a jail and sleeping quarters. Puller was forced to fashion bars for the cell windows from the barrels of the captured rifles. The captain directed each outpost to raise vegetables and supplement the daily rations of 10 cents per man, and somehow, despite handicaps, his little military empire prospered. Lewis did not go unnoticed by his peers, and early in 1921 he was recommended for the permanent commission in the Marine Corps, where his rank was now that of sergeant. He took examinations, but failed the section on trigonometry, as did 90% of his class. Someone had reversed the traditional order that the trig books could be used on the examination, and Lewis found himself at a loss. A few months later, Puller had malaria once more. This time he was in no doubt as to his plight, and when he felt the fever, went to the Brigadier Hospital and asked a doctor for intravenous injections of quarantine. "We'd never do that, Captain. It might well be fatal. I had 'em before. They cured me. Some foreign doctor practiced it, but it's strictly against our orders." Puller went on to a civilian doctor in Port-au-Prince, took the injection, and recovered within a week. Lewis was again recommended for commission. The paper endorsed by virtually every officer in the command, and in February 1924, after months of review of Creole, French, and mathematics, while he served as adjutant to Colonel A. Vandergrift in Port-au-Prince, he again became a second lieutenant, U.S. Marine Corps. But this time he was a regular. "I may not have much else to go on," he told a friend, "but I have some perseverance." He was soon ordered to Marine Barracks, Portsmouth, Virginia, Navy Yard, and embarked with 11 other new second lieutenants. It was not until years later that Puller realized the full richness of the Haitian experience and the value of lessons in soldiering and hand-to-hand combat. He had fought 40 actions. He not only been bloodied, the guerrilla combat had also continued most of its introduced by ambush on the trail. Puller had stood up well under this strain and had come to trust his own physical prowess and ability to lead men under fire. He had discovered that native troops could become superb soldiers. He had developed his instincts talented for using terrain in battle and learned the lessons of jungle fighting. He had become strongly prejudged against barracks and headquarters soldiers. Despite his youth, he was one of the most seasoned combat officers in the course. This is page 39. Tomorrow, we'll read chapter 6. It's called New Skills. I apologize if my reading skills are not the greatest right now. Some of that stuff, because he was down in Haiti, because he's Haiti, a lot of stuff's in French. And a lot of names are in French, and I don't read French. When I get back, I gotta go, though. I got a thing to do. I'm gonna read Relentless and World War. I got a meeting I gotta get to. I gotta change clothes. I just want you all to know this. The reason why I'm reading The Marine by Chesty Puller right now And you wonder how it goes along with business, and how it goes along with hope, and how it goes along with freedoms, and all these books I read. Chesty Puller started as a grunt. He started as as basically enlisted in the Marine Corps. Okay, he had to start from the bottom, but it was perseverance that kept him through. And the more you read about perseverance, people that don't give up, you can read about Michael Jordan and all them. We're reading about some sports in this one. We're reading about Sun Tzu and the art of war and everything, okay? It all goes together, okay? And one thing you're going to learn is perseverance, continue pushing on no matter what the obstacle, has gotten through people like Chesty Puller every single time. So if you're in sales or business or becoming a boss, if you just keep pushing forward, you have to break rules. And I hate saying that because people are like, oh, so you're going to break the rules and laws. Laws were put in place. I get that. But we have to break them sometimes because sometimes they put so many restrictions on us that people forget how we work and how we move forward and how we persevere. And, we got to attack the enemy on the enemy's ground. We can't let them come into our home. This is what life is about. Life is about going forward, pushing forward, and that's what Chesty Puller is. You want to know why he is basically the hero of an enlisted in the officers in the Marine Corps? It's because he never gave up. He didn't care who you were, what you did, what your color, what your sex, what your race. He used everybody because the thing about it was mission. Mission essential. All right, my name's Jeff. I got to get going. I got to get over and see my buddy Mark. Got to check my alternator. And I'll talk to everybody soon. Bye, everybody.